Thank you very much. It's very nice to see you in the chair this afternoon, Sir Christopher. I'm very pleased to have secured this debate on child trust funds. The Child Trust Fund was a landmark Labour policy set up by Gordon Brown in 2005 to give every young person a financial asset. It was closed to new accounts by the coalition government in 2011. When he launched it in 2005, Gordon Brown said, "Our aim is a Britain of ambition and aspiration, where not just some, but all children have the best possible start in life. The Child Trust Fund is designed to ensure that every child has assets and wealth and that no child is left out." Unfortunately, it would seem that lots of children are indeed being left out. Child Trust Funds were launched in 2005. They provided a tax-free savings account with government contributions to children born between the 1st of September 2002 and the 2nd of January 2011. Under the scheme, the child is allowed to manage the account when they become 16, but are only able to withdraw money when they reach 18 years of age, and the funds will first mature on the 1st of September 2020. The scheme was designed to provide a financial cushion for young people as they entered adult life, at the same time building skills and confidence in money management. The Child Trust Funds were closed down in 2011, as I said, but they remain live and continue to gain value through market growth and family contributions. And today, the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced continuation of the tax-free status. There are now 6 million such accounts, worth an astonishing £9.5 billion in total. But shockingly, the government has lost over 1 million of the account holders, and their accounts are worth £1.5 billion. What a blunder. The government has failed to run this properly.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I congratulate her on her securing this debate here today. Does she share my concern that when I've put down written parliamentary questions asking for the number of lost accounts by social class or nation and region, the Minister doesn't know? When I've asked him how much additional resources he's allocated, the Minister doesn't know. Doesn't this show a lack of political will to identify this and get that money to the poorest children in the country?
Absolutely. I didn't know about my honourable friend's parliamentary questions, but I find that astonishing. The figures that I'm going to present this afternoon come from the Share Foundation. There are now 6 million accounts worth £9.3 billion. But 6% of the accounts held by children in the top 15% of the income distribution have been lost. And in total, those have a value of £213 million. 14% of accounts in middle-income families, where the HMRC can't link them up with the family, have a value of £540 million. But for those children from families on child tax credits, the worst off, struggling families in the lowest 15% of the income distribution, there is no contact information for 4 out of 10 of them. And the Share Foundation tell me that on top of that, another 40% have been contacted but have not responded. So this is something between 400 and 800,000 children with accounts valued at £1,600, a lost value of £710 million, or even £1.4 billion. This is completely disgraceful. Losing £1,000 may not seem like a lot to a Treasury Minister on a salary of £100,000 a year, but to most families in my constituency, it is a fortune which could pay a young person's rent as a student for several months, or for a course, or to learn to drive.
Thank you, Mr Chope. My honourable friend's making an excellent speech. I have to declare an interest. Both my children received child trust funds when they were born, and it started the pathway for us to save for them for when they were 18. I think this is a terrible scandal, and actually the government should be recompensing all those families who missed out and actually look at the accrued interest and compensate them fully for everything they've lost.
Well, I think what the government need to do, because the money's is in the accounts, but the families haven't accessed them and don't know about them, what the government need to do is link them up. And the Chancellor had an opportunity this afternoon in his spring statement, which he failed to take. The whole purpose of the scheme, Sir Christopher, was to redistribute so that the wealthiest children were given a government contribution of £250 at the outset, middle-income children £500, but poorer children and children with disabilities got more. They got it in 2 chunks, which totalled an average of £920.
I thank my honourable friend for being so generous. Can I ask her why she thinks that she is able to get this information from the Share Foundation and I am not able to get the information from the department?
Well, I simply think that the Treasury have taken their eye off the ball completely on this. They think that they can contract the administration out to a small charity, well-intentioned charity, doing its best, but this is fundamentally a government responsibility, and government ministers must take their share of the responsibility. So the amount that was given, as I was saying, Christopher, so if you were in a wealthy family, you started off with £250. If you were in a poor family, you started off with £920. But the valuation of the accounts now show that that position has completely reversed. The wealthiest children, their accounts are now worth on average £4,000, but the accounts of the children in the poorest families are worth £1,600. And that's partly because wealthy families were able to keep topping up, which poor families can't afford to do. And of course, they've been managing them in a more active way. So in essence, the government has overturned the whole purpose of the scheme. Moreover, the government, as my honourable friend says, seem to be hiding these funds from those for whom they're intended. Information is printed in tiny little typeface on the letter that goes to 16-year-olds, giving them their national insurance number. And all it says is, when you turn 16, take control of your child trust fund, ask your parents for more information, go to www.gov.uk/child-trust-funds. Now, if you don't know that you've got a child trust fund or what a child trust fund is, you're not going to notice that or follow that. What it ought to say is, you have an asset, it's probably £1,000. If you want to get hold of it, you need to do this. And it should be in big red typeface, like the national insurance number itself on the letter which is sent out. Furthermore, once you click through to the government website, most young people won't actually be able to access it, even if they follow the instructions in the letter that they get with their national insurance number. Because the government website requires them to have a government gateway user ID. I don't know if you're familiar with government gateway user IDs, Sir Christopher, but this means, as well as their national insurance number, a young people needs a passport or a P60 or a payslip. Now, obviously, 16-year-olds are at school, they don't have P60s and payslips, and because we're particularly concerned about the people in the low-income families, of course, many of them don't have passports, and a passport is a very expensive document to get. More to the point, the young people are not really very financially sophisticated. So 62% of 14 to 17-year-olds can't read a payslip, and only 52% of 7 to 17-year-olds say they have received any financial education in school, at home, or in other settings. The government contracted out the administration to a charity called the Share Foundation. The Share Foundation has been administering the scheme for the 45,000 children in care, and they have managed to track down 60% of these children via the local authority records, and that's very commendable. But I put it to the Minister that it is completely irresponsible to contract out the administration of a database of 6 million people to a voluntary sector organisation for a fee of £300,000 a year and expect 1.5 million people to be tracked down on a voluntary basis. HMRC writes to every mother whose child is soon to be 18, saying that their entitlement to child benefit is about to end. My suggestion to the Minister is that this would be the perfect opportunity to signpost them to the Child Trust Fund. Then mothers could be told, your child benefit is going to come to an end, but when it does, your child will be entitled to this money, and here is how to get hold of it. And I hope the Minister will take that away and implement that with HMRC, which is a government department under the responsibility of the Treasury.
Would my honourable friend give way? I thank my honourable friend for giving way, but is she aware that there may be a possibility that these accounts that have not been activated may be deemed dormant and subject to the Dormant Bank and Building Society Account Act? Does she agree that that is an issue?
That's exactly right, because if that happens and they're dormant for 15 years, then the person will, at that point, no longer be able to access it. A YouGov poll, which was published at lunchtime today, has underscored this lack of signposting. According to the YouGov poll, 1 in 6 parents of children aged 8 to 16 were not aware of child trust funds. And among families who were receiving child tax credit at the time, and thus would have been eligible for the hire voucher from the government, 1 in 5 were not aware of the existence of child trust funds. This is a scandalous and secret maladministration on a vast scale of public money. If these 1 million children and young people are not tracked down, and the 1.5 billion given to those for whom it was set aside, it will go back to the Treasury, as my honourable friend said, to be redistributed by a bureaucrat. This would be a terrible waste, not just of the money, but of the life chances of the young people for whom it was intended.
Minister.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Sir Christopher. And may I start by congratulating the honourable member for Bishop Auckland for securing this debate. I recognise she's taken a keen interest in this issue, and she has been a doughty campaigner on matters of childcare and child poverty, following her 11 months in a ministerial position in the previous Labour government. And I acknowledge the points made by other honourable members, and I shall try and address the points that they've made. This government shares the commitment of members across the House to supporting people to save at every stage of life, irrespective of income or background. And financial inclusion is one of my key priorities as Economic Secretary. And in the past year, I've met with many organisations and experts who work in this field. And I strongly believe that teaching financial skills at a young age equips young people to make better decisions when they're older. And that's why I'm pleased to have the opportunity to set out the government's view today. As we've heard, the government introduced junior ISAs in place of child trust funds in November 2011, thereby providing continued tax incentive to encourage families to put money away for their children's future. Now, under legislation introduced in 2015, existing child trust fund accounts can be transferred into a junior ISA, providing families with the flexibility to choose the right option for their child. The government also sought to make specific provision for children in care, contracting the Share Foundation, as the Honourable Lady pointed out, to work with local authorities to open a junior ISA account on behalf of looked after children. And the government currently pays £200 into the accounts of children who have been in care for at least 1 year. And the Department for Education has provided the Share Foundation with funding totalling £531,624 for that administration. And 120,000 payments of £200 have been made to children in care since 2012. And we want those children to be able to leave care with money to their name and with the means to continue saving as they become independent. At this point, I should stress that junior ISAs are just one element of our work to promote financial inclusion among young people. We want all children to be able to enter the world of work, understanding the importance of budgeting and saving, which is why financial literacy is now taught as part of the citizenship curriculum for 11 to 16-year-old. Now, turning to the so-called lost child trust funds, the core proposition behind the Honourable Lady's debate this afternoon, there are many complex and overlapping reasons for the lack of engagement, and the government is working with industry to actively seek holders of these accounts. Child trust fund providers are required to send regular statements to the child's last known address and are taking steps to trace those who have moved. They have a statutory obligation to do that on the 7th, 10th and 15th birthdays of those children, but most, in line with FCA guidance, do it on an annual basis. At the same time, HMRC has recently amended the National Insurance Notification Letter, which is sent to all 16-year-olds to include details of how child trust funds can be located. And the Honourable Lady made reference to that. She made reference to the size and colour of the font, and clearly that's a matter that I can take on board and examine. But I would also draw the attention to, honourable members, of HMRC's online tracing tool that is available via gov.uk. Of course, people can still contact HMRC by telephone and post if they choose. So, looking to the future, as the Honourable Lady said, I'd be very happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Can I put to him the question that I put to my Honourable colleague here? The Share Foundation were able to give statistics on the distribution amongst different socio-economic groups to the Honourable Member, but when I put down questions, the exact same question to the Minister, that information was not available. When I asked by each nation and region, that information wasn't available. When I asked how much additional resources were allocated to locating these the child trust funds, the information wasn't available. Can he supply that information here today?
I'm grateful to the intervention from the member from the Vale of Clwyd. And in terms of regional and income distribution or breakdown of child trust funds, this information is published by HMRC and discriminates between region and county and whether additional contributions were made. No income distribution data is collected by HMRC. I'm very happy to look into this further. If there's anything more that I can give him, I will write to him with that information. But if I get back to the point about looking to the future, there are around 6 million child trust funds that have not yet been transferred to junior ISAs. The first of these will mature next September, and thereafter 55,000 accounts will mature every month up until 2029. And what young people choose to do with their money is ultimately a matter for them, but we want them to be engaged in the process so that they can make the best decision for their individual circumstances. I'm very happy to give way.
I mean, I explained to the Minister that the problem is you can't use the government website to access the account if you haven't got a payslip or a P60 or a passport. So could the Minister please address that specific point? Because hundreds of thousands of young people will be in that situation.
I mean, the key point is, how does an individual child know what they've got? And the allegation that the Honourable Lady is making is that this money is lost. It's not lost, it's just that the individuals haven't come to the point when they can engage with it, which happens when they get a letter from, with their national insurance number, aged 16. At age 16, they are then allowed to make decisions around the investment choices within that fund. At 18, they are able to access it. And now let me just finish my point, and then I'll give way. So the issue is, if they get that letter at 16, which is at the time when they're able to start making decisions about it individually, they will get that letter as part of the national insurance. So if the suggestion, which I think has been made, is that actually the Share Foundation should interrogate DWP data, cross-reference it with HMRC, and somehow write to these individuals, they are not in a position that, well, that point has been made in other forum, but I'm just trying to respond completely to the points that have been raised in general. But I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
I thank the Minister for giving way. What plans does the Minister have to encourage eligible parents and children when they turn 16 to access this money. Isn't it a responsibility of the government to be doing some kind of public awareness campaign to say, hey, look, here's your your investment that the government made for you, this is how you access it. And let's actually make this a can-do exercise.
I think the key point is this money is for children to have access to when they're 18, but being able to influence decisions on from the age of 16 when they're paying tax and they have a national insurance number. They will gain that access mechanism when they secure their national insurance number. Now, as I said, the Honourable Lady made a point about the way that is depicted on the form when they get their national insurance number, but that provides the key to unlock awareness and access to the fund that has been invested for them. Does the Honourable Lady want to...
I'm sorry, I mean, I don't like to sort of denigrate my former profession, but I don't think the Minister's been very well briefed. Because according to the Share Foundation, the lost accounts of the most wealthy number 54,000, of the middle income number 560,000, and of the poorest number 444,000. Now that isn't of those families where the child is already 16 to 18. That includes all the families. And what it means is the addressee has gone away. You don't know whether the address you have got is the right address for this group of people.
The point I'm making is that all individuals, no matter what their background, will gain access to the funds at the point when they can gain their national insurance number by reference to the letter that's been provided. And I have had extensive conversations with my officials, and I note the reference the Honourable Lady made to bureaucrats. I mean, she worked for over 20 years in the Treasury. I have the highest regard for them and the accuracy of the material that they've given me. No funds or accounts have been lost. All child trust funds have been managed by child trust fund providers, either by the original provider with whom an account was set up, or a subsequent provider where the funds have been transferred. There are 69 providers currently managing child trust funds, and the Share Foundation's analysis appears to be based on accounts held with just one provider. That's the Share Centre, representing only 1.5% number of accounts. And if the Honourable Lady wants to contradict that in terms of the extrapolation of that data to the whole of them, I don't know. But the government is working together with all industry to encourage child trust fund holders to re-engage with their accounts. And as I say, we have developed an online tracing mechanism and recently amended the National Insurance Notification Letter to 16-year-olds to include that reference to child trust funds. That happened in January of this year to take account of the points that were being raised. And any account holders who are unable to retrieve their account details online are encouraged to contact HMRC directly. And last year's budget... Yeah, very happy to give mine.
I've just explained to the Minister that to get through to the website, you have to have these other documents which, by definition, 16-year-olds don't have, can't have. So it's not a system that's working. The Minister needs to rethink how this website works.
I don't think raising a voice in an aggressive manner is going to help anyone. I mean, I've just set out the government's position. I've explained the detail of the provision. She's extrapolated some figures from one piece of analysis of one of the providers, which isn't, I don't think, a reliable way of carrying on. And I've told her the action we took in January this year, and it's not just about the online portal, it's also about being able to call up HMRC. And last year's budget included a commitment to consult on draft regulations which will ensure that investments currently held in child trust fund accounts can retain their tax-free status post-maturity. And the consultation will take place later this spring, and the government will lay regulations before the House well in advance of the first accounts maturing in September 20. So in summary, both junior ISAs and child trust funds allow parents and guardians to save on behalf of their children tax-free. People have the option to convert their child trust fund into a junior ISA, and we are working with providers to reunite dormant accounts with their intended owner. However, all remaining child trust funds will continue to enjoy tax-free status even after they mature. And I should add that the amounts that can be saved by young people in child trust funds and junior ISAs will increase by inflation this April. It's at currently £4,260 a year. I'd be very happy to give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Would the Minister... I honestly agree with my honourable friend here that the system isn't working. No. As a way out, would the Minister consider a meeting with people who have the sufficient knowledge, and I would include my honourable friend here, but perhaps Citizens Advice Bureau and the Share Foundation, to see exactly, and perhaps a panel of parents, to see if some answers can come to the questions that have been raised.
Yeah. I'd be very happy to, on behalf of my colleague, the member for Stratford-upon-Avon, who is the Minister responsible in this area, who's currently before a select committee, to offer a meeting with honourable members to discuss this matter further, because it's his responsibility, and he'd be very happy to do that, I'm sure. But the point I want to make is that the efforts that we've made provide young people with savings to draw upon as they reach adulthood, and we hope encourage further saving at every stage of life. The Honourable Lady's points concerning access, as I say, have comprehensively been met by the government's action in terms of that letter at 16. I understand she's not satisfied by my response, but as I say, I think a meeting with the Minister would probably be the best way forward. I'd be happy to give way.
Will the Minister take on board my suggestion of writing to the recipient of the child benefit when the person is 18? Because that is another opportunity when the government is writing to every mother across the entire nation, and that would be an opportunity for catching them in the net.
Well, I think the key point here is at what point does somebody have access to make investment decisions themselves as a young person, and that is when they're 16, and then they can access it when they're 18. I think trying to overlap the letter with a mother when it's about the beneficiary, which is the child, is not the route to go down. But I think that the best way forward would be for the Honourable Lady, who's clearly shaking her head and dissatisfied, to meet with my colleague from the Department for Education. Hopefully that will provide her with the answers she needs.